to the broader edge, candid conversations that envision a new future. Step with us into the edge of evolution as we explore the shifting thoughts, beliefs, and actions that are shaping our tomorrow. Now, join your hosts, Terry Angel, Sheila Cash, Mira Rubin, and Liz Williams for candid conversations that envision a new future.
Welcome everyone. Hello. Welcome to the Broader Edge. And we are so thrilled to be here with you tonight. I'm Terry Angel, and I want each of my co-hosts that are here to just unmute and share with us your name and let us see your beautiful face.
Hi, I'm Mira Rubin.
I'm Liz Williams.
Cash.
Welcome everyone. Oh, what a great opportunity to come forward and speak out in these days. And what we're speaking about tonight is change. So get comfortable and let's have a discussion. I love this show. I love these ladies. And it's always a great discussion. No matter what our topic, tonight it happens to be change. And change is that word that, oh my gosh, for so many years now, if you're like me at all, you've been saying, oh, I really would like to see change, right? It's either been on our minds or in our speech or both. But now it's time to ask ourselves, what the heck does that mean? What does it mean when I say, I want change? But just to say I want change, that's pretty vague. It's like saying, if I went out and said, I want a dog, it's like, okay, Terry, do you want a little dog, a big dog? There's such an extreme. And that's such a vague thing. And it's that way too when we say change. But yet we know that things can't stay the same as they are. So we're really saying, I want to see things different than what they are in our outside world right now. They can't continue as they are going. And we all know this. That's a known. What we don't know is, okay, what is it that we want then? What do we desire to see out there in that world? It's certainly not those blatant acts of violence and injustice. That's something that has been the catalyst right now to throw us into more looking at what change is and what our part is in that change. So as we think about that and we get to a point where, things have built and built and built, and now it's like, enough is enough. Enough is enough. And what do I want now? What do I want to see as far as that kind of change? I want to share with you with what one of my mentors spoke about recently. And she took a lot of time after the first incident of violence and just horrible injustice that happened. And she went inside and she just really prayed about what to say and how to say it before just a knee-jerk reaction. And she said, whatever my contribution is to be, without measure or comparison to anyone, it's to disrupt the fiber of what has been. Let's go, let's grow, and let's be willing to have those hard conversations with ourselves so we can have them with each other. Ladies, I've been excited about this talk, but there's also that aura of, wow, this is going to be a hard conversation because, what do we say? And how do we take this apart and look at it as far as what that change is? How do we really express ourselves in the midst of what's going on? And, this change is more than just, moving something from one point to another. This is global. This is a global change. And so I really would like your input and your thoughts about how to have these conversations, how to speak up and have conversations with others regarding this, because isn't that the starting point? Isn't that point A where we have to begin to really look at what we want to bring forth? Anybody?
Yeah, and I think you're speaking to it, Terry, when you talk about using our voices and speaking up. For much of the population right now, I think there's a need. The change that's desired has to do with recognition of humanity, of the humanity in everyone. Different people of different ages and different, persuasions may have, varying ideas on exactly what is needed, but showing up and bringing your voice and bringing your body in numbers with the marches or online or in blogs. We have that ability now globally to bring our voices, and consensus is always what brings a big change. It takes that tipping point. But just voicing and really, in this case, really going deep to recognize humanity itself in every single one of us, and speaking that out, and sharing that thought. If we stay quiet, there will be no global changes at all.
Yeah, I don't think we have the luxury of silence at this moment in time. And it's interesting in this conversation about change. I think that change is something that occurs incrementally. Sometimes it does occur in an exponential way. This may be one of those times. I hope that it is. It feels like it may be. However, the change that I want to see, or that I desire, is a change from competition to cooperation and collaboration, from separation to oneness, from prejudice to family, where we really shift our paradigm. And what I believe is at the root of all of that is a change from treating life and living as a commodity that produces results that we value monetarily most often, to switch from that paradigm of life as commodity to life as process. And where living life itself is the value of living, rather than what we produce or how much we own or how many things we have, how much we earn. So to make the transition from commodifying life to really experiencing and valuing life, and then that will enable us to value others and to value our planet and our nature. And that is where the profound shift will occur. I started out by saying change is incremental. In this case, it may or may not be, but I believe that what's occurring now is a really, really important primary step.
So based on what you're saying, Mira, it sounds like we do need to start within. Like if we need to be sure that we ourselves are valuing life in that way, where we see where perhaps we're not living fully, but instead we're just on that treadmill of acquire, achieve, compete. And so, kind of asking ourselves the hard questions: what would need to shift for me in order to be living differently, so that I show up differently, and then can ask that of others, right? But if we're living in that old paradigm, it's very difficult to ask others to shift that paradigm. So it does there's this balance between looking within, doing that inner work, but then taking that out and affecting change.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I'm loving everything that you all are saying. And Mira, you touched on this, that we create in two different ways. we create by making something happen, right? By proactively going out and doing something. But we also create by letting things happen. And I think there's been a lot of that, and it's not a balance. There's too much of the letting it happen. And sometimes it does take that catalyst to make us look at things more closely. And, you know, this is kind of trivial, but I liken it to my garbage. You know, I'm a single person and I hate the chore of having to drag my garbage out to the dumpster. So sometimes I'll let it sit there. And so it builds and, you know, okay, it's there. It's an eyesore, but it's there. And then when I put something in it and it falls on the floor, now there's something that's triggering me. There's something that says, oh my gosh, now I have to clean the floor, you know, in addition to taking the garbage out. So sometimes we let things build and build like that. And then all of a sudden there's stuff on the floor and we're like, whoa, if only I had stepped back and taken that out when I knew I was supposed to take it out, then I wouldn't have that issue. And I think that's a lot of what we can look at now. It's like things have built, they've really built. And so we've allowed a lot of things. And I have allowed, I've let things just slide. And, you know, I was a part of the problem because I didn't go inside. I didn't search and say, you know, how do I feel about that? When I would see an injustice, when I would see, you know, the racism especially, I grew up with it. I grew up in a small town where it was just so prevalent there. Yeah. Sheila, you know what the mountains are like, and it's just there. So, you know, it's doing that deep dive and having, like I said, those hard conversations, even with ourselves, and say, am I contributing to this problem? I see it. I see what's spilled on the floor. Did I contribute to that? What is my ownership of that? And then can I take a proactive step? Is there something for me to maybe do in addition to really cleaning out my own self and all of those beliefs that are in there?
I just want really, really quick. I just want to say, you said the question is to ask, how, did I contribute to that? I think the question is, how did I contribute to that?
Yes,
because
thank you, Mira.
We've all contributed
absolutely.
to it.
We have all contributed to it, yeah.
Well, but I think
my part.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point is, I think many of us feel like we haven't contributed because we haven't intentionally done something. It's been the sitting back. It's been the ignoring or overlooking or that type of thing. So, you know, our initial reaction is, that's not who I am. That's not how I've been. But as we dive closer or dive deeper, we do start to see how perhaps even just our avoiding a situation has contributed to it.
Mm-hmm. And when you said the word proactivity, Terry, that, you know, that was one that was coming up for me, that it's the one of the greatest changes that we can make is going from being reactive to being proactive. And then your creations are more by choice rather than by chance. And that's a quote from one of my mentors, Barbara Marx Hubbard, who has passed away now, but she, you know, that choice, it's really about conscious evolution, living consciously, making choices rather than just allowing the chances. You know, and when we are more proactive, we're less vulnerable because change can be traumatizing for people, you know, highly traumatizing. But the more proactive you are, the more you're choosing the change, you know, the less traumatizing it'll be.
I also think, to your point, Liz, that we need to do the inner work. And I think it's also really important to say, yes, 100% we need to do the inner work, and that's not enough. And it's not just a person-to-person game, it's an institutionalized game. And as we look at this whole notion that underlies competition and commoditization of human life, we can look at that in our laws. And when we look at it in our laws, they're the same laws that are perpetuating racism, that are perpetuating inequity in our system, because they are targeting people not just of color, but of different socioeconomic background and different ethnic origin. And we can be looking at how there are disproportionalities in the results that we achieve with our current policies. And we can look at that and say, well, how do we make this more equitable? How do we make this something that is serving everybody in an equal fashion?
Love that. And to remember that we all have a voice. Yeah, we all have a voice. So asking ourselves, where's my voice in this? Where do I speak up? How do I speak up? I can't remember which one of you that said blogging, Sheila, that might have been you, how we can really start shining that light. We have to do the inner work. But then there's a point where it's like, okay, let's shine that light out there now. Now that I've shown it on myself and I've illuminated what's in there, let's take it a step further. And that's what it feels like. It's a step further. So one of the ways we can use our voice, and Mira, I'm so glad that you brought up that, is we can petition for change. There's a lot going on right now. Thank God there's a lot going on with things that are coming up and looked at under a microscope and saying, wow, that just got to go. That just is not going to fly anymore. This world is too transparent to hide. And we can't hide those old laws, those old ways that things were, and the old attitudes. So using our voice, I think, and how do we do that? Where do we begin? I always go back to, I'm just one person. I'm just one person. What does it matter? But all of us matter. And so what are some of the ways that we can start using our voices out in the world?
Before we proceed further, I just want to address something that you said, and that was when it's all cleaned out in the inside. And I can say that I don't think it ever gets all cleaned out. I think it's a constant life quest.
It is, yeah. It's constant looking at it.
Yeah.
But once we get a thought and an idea of where we're at with it, and start changing that in ourselves, then we can start putting thoughts together more clearly, because all of that stuff that's in there clouds our thinking.
It's true. And it shouldn't stop us from taking action.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I think the first step you just mentioned, Terry, change within ourselves. It's easier to affect change outwardly when you have some experience in what that process looks like. And I think we all know that one of our biggest fears is change. We've all been conditioned to play it safe, play it small, stay, it's all about safety and kind of staying within your zone. And, personal change can't happen as long as we stay in the fear of the unknown, the fear of the stepping forward. And, and certainly globally, but in some ways it can be easier for people to bring their voices to the global stage because it's not personal. Sometimes, sometimes it is personal, but, whether it is personal or isn't personal, you can bring your voice to a blog or to a march, to a poster board, a sign or something, as a first step.
I do think it takes courage, because I think that when we do decide to step up and use our voice, we are setting ourselves up for criticism, regardless of what we're saying or what side we're on, or even if we're in the middle. And it's rare, in the last couple of months, that when I post a blog, I don't have somebody unsubscribe. It's usually just one person, but somebody didn't like what I said. And so you have to be okay with that. You have to know that if you're being true to yourself, that you're being authentic, that this is what you want to express, that not everyone is going to agree, and that's okay. But it does take courage. I think that's one of the things that holds people back. I think the other thing that holds people back is we're so busy and so overwhelmed with life. And it's not an excuse or a good excuse anymore, but it is the reality of it. It's almost as if society has set us up to be so busy that we can't pay attention to what's going on and we can't take action on it. So we have to be very, very aware of that in our own lives and intentional, and decide that we're going to be willing to maybe even adjust things so that we can have more time or resources to devote to making the changes that we'd like to see.
You make a really, really, really good point, and that's talking about values. And if we've received any gift from COVID, it's the gift, first of all, of slowing everything down. Not for everybody, but for a number of people. And secondly, it's given us an opportunity to reassess our values and our priorities. And I believe that so many people have come to recognize that the values that they had been holding were somewhat skewed, that this isn't the most opportune time, perhaps in human history, to be assessing where we're heading and how we want to go there. And we get to make the things that we value important.
I have loved talking with younger couples and hearing them say that this time has made them realize that the time together, the quality time they've been able to have, is so valuable. They would be willing now to give up some of the material and not work so hard and so many long hours in order to have more time together. That alone is magnificent, I think. So I think you're right, Mira. I think it's really—
You brought up the go ahead, Liz, sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think you're right, Mira. I mean, I think this has been, for many of us, a time of reevaluating.
Yeah. So I heard the word authentic as well, Mira. I know you brought it up, and you know, our change, even at a global level, personal level, any kind of change, is driven by the life impulse that runs through us. You know, the desire for change always comes for a reason. There's a reason that we want change. You know, and as long as we are tuning in to our core authenticity and staying close to that, then the changes are going to bring about good effects. And, you know, we don't have to worry, we don't have to fear as much, but kind of staying to that, you know, to our authentic values, our authentic core. And global change comes about, you know, if we look through human history, all of the global change has been, you know, has been heading in a forward direction, in a progressive direction. Sometimes we get off track, but then we feel collectively that change to get back on track again, such as, you know, with the environment now. But what's happening in the streets in Washington and the cities all around the world is driven by, you know, a collective desire that's going somewhere for a reason. It's never random, you know, that it's always purposeful. So as long as we remember that there is purpose and that there will be good effects on the other side. Sometimes it can be chaotic getting to the other side. And that's, you know, and that's something we seem to be working out. Even lately, as a matter of fact, I had a conversation recently that there seems to be a quiet revolution going on right now. And revolution doesn't look like it used to look like, at least not yet. There's little bouts here and little, you know, little skirmishes here and there. And of course, we have had the very tragic deaths as well. But on a collective level, we're keeping it together in order to affect change better, I think, than we have before in our human history.
And I think what you say is so comforting, Sheila, when think about that, you know, this is purposeful. And even though it looks like chaos, there's purpose in it and good on the other side. And that really helps, because otherwise we can become so overwhelmed with whatever it is, anger, grief, frustration that we either become paralyzed or it impacts our health and it impacts, how we're living. And so that doesn't allow us to go out and affect the change that we want to affect. So just kind of changing that perspective and keeping it in perspective, I think is really, really healthy and valuable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love that because, right now it's history in the making. And if we stop and think that thought, that can be overwhelming in itself, can't it?
Yeah. I read something about the history of race relations in this country, and I read a fact that I found so interesting, and that was that there were race riots in 1919, and it was on the heels of the Spanish flu epidemic. I thought, wow, it's so weird. What a weird parallel. And hopefully we're going to use this now that we actually have true global communication. We're going to use this collectively to make the change that we've been trying to make for for hundreds of years, right? And it's not isolated to the relationships between white people and people of color in this country. It's a global phenomenon where people of different origins look at each other as separate and other and a threat. And that whole perceived threat comes from a foundation belief in lack. And what we need to do is to find our way to this cooperative, collective notion, because really there's enough if we share with each other, if we take care of each other, if we have community, if we value life instead of things, or if we prioritize life over things. What a concept. And Terry, to your point about climate change, I think it was you, I'm not sure if it was Terry or Sheila, but talking about how we're really truly facing a larger crisis even than, or a more immediate crisis than our horrible injustices to one another. And that is that we're destroying our environment at a rate that if we don't correct it in 10 years, we're not going to have a habitable place, or a place that is conducive to have our habitation. And so much of the climate crisis is also a crisis of class and race disparity, because even through COVID, people of color are suffering the financial hardships of this epidemic more than white people. And so it's really an interesting and very exciting and heartening, for me, hopeful convergence that's happening right now with the shift of awareness and consciousness. I mean, everybody knows what yoga is these days, which is remarkable, right?
And meditation.
Right. And you don't get burned alive for talking to spirits, right? And so there are lots of changes of awareness and consciousness that really, I think, are probably unprecedented. Well, on a global scale, certainly unprecedented, right? So we live in a very unique time where we are facing a global collective emergency, and on the way to healing that, we get to heal the injustices that we've done to ourselves, to each other, to our planet, to make something that is a real elevation and escalation in being and consciousness, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, Mira. I love that. And, 4 years ago, COVID wasn't a word. We didn't know that. We didn't know about, this whole outage of the injustices and everything that we're able to see now transparently. 4 years ago, Forbes did a survey, and the question that they asked was, if you could say in one word what you want more in life, what would that be? So now we're going back to values, right? To what we value. So the question was, if you could say in one word what you want more in life, more of in life, what would that be? The number one answer from that was happiness. Number two was money. Number three was freedom. And number four was peace. So very interesting, I think, if we redid that survey, given these recent happenings, I think we might see a whole lot different answers, don't you think?
I would hope so. Freedom's
Yeah.
number one for me.
Me too.
Yeah, I was amazed. I'm like, okay, that's like way down the list there. But I think we needed a catalyst. You know, as hard as this has been, the loss of lives, you know, the lockdown, everything that was so hard about it, we needed a catalyst for us to do that examination. You know, if you ask me that question, it certainly wouldn't. I mean, I want happiness, sure, just like the next person, but freedom, oh my gosh, that would be the first thing out of my mouth.
You know,
It was interesting. You know, when that first occurred to me was actually when I was doing my inner work, which was a few years ago. So it was long before any of this was happening. And as I was exploring, and I try to ask myself deeper and deeper, well, what do you really want? Well, I don't want to be in fear. I don't want anxiety. I don't want, you know, this, that, or the other thing. I don't want these things. And when I dug deeper, what came to me was, I want to feel free. I want that freedom, that inner freedom.
Yeah.
And then it goes to, you know, the freedom to be authentically who I am and voice my opinions and that kind of thing. But it wasn't until then, the COVID and the shutdown, I started to really recognize that I also desired some external freedom, that I really, and it's not so much about because I want to be able to do what I want to do. There's some of that, but more than that, it's, I want to be able to know what truth is. And I don't want to be told by those that I don't know if I can trust, this is what truth is, and therefore you're going to live this way. So it was so interesting to me that outer freedom became so much more important than I was aware of. But it also led me to think about what I see in the streets, what I see in the protests, what I see in the violence are, I believe, individuals who just want that same freedom. They want to be able to be free, to be fully who they are and who they came here to be. And without that freedom, of course, anger and resentment and rage builds up until it, you know, it just explodes. But I don't know. That's my thought is I think freedom is really, really important for everyone. And if we could get to freedom to where everyone was, there was equality enough that everyone felt free, the world would change dramatically.
Yes. And, you know, it's interesting as you're talking about freedom, and I'm thinking about even peace. You know, a lot of our desires and our values are based on what we do have, what we have experienced.
Yeah.
You know, peace is going to rise way up on the list, the less of it that you have. The less of it you have, the more of it you want. And the same with freedom. You know, if when we have, you know, when we have felt very free at different times in our, you know, history, we're not thinking about it as much, you know, but then, you know, then things happen. Like when 9/11 happened, I realized that freedom wasn't free.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a, you know, frightening thought. You know, and so, you know, freedom is really big there, but at this particular time, people are valuing health more than ever before. And, you know, to be able to be with others and remain healthy. This is something we're really struggling with collectively too. You know, and I loved what someone had said earlier about sharing, that, you know, change is much easier when we are sharing, when we give support to each other. You know, any kind of change when you're having support is easier. That being said, sometimes it takes those sort of trailblazers to step forward when nobody else will, and to have to be on their own. And you've spoken to that, Liz. And so either we need to be trailblazers to get it done, but the more support that we have along the way, the easier the change actually is in the long run.
I think it's really important for us to look at the issue of freedom and health right now, because I think it's imminent that there is going to be a vaccine that we are going to be maybe mandated to receive. And I think that that's a really big issue when it comes to freedom, because we have different ideas about the safety of these vaccines and about the efficacy of them, and what the question of freedom in the face of potentially mandated medical procedure is a really big challenging concern. I know for me, I'm not taking, I don't get the flu shot. I don't take vaccines because I'm in a risk category for those things. I already know that. And so I believe it preserves my health not to take those things, based on what I've heard from medical professionals, even. Not all, because a lot of them purport that I should be getting those vaccines. But, and if it comes to a time when we're told that it's required, that's going to present a big issue of freedom for me.
Absolutely. Dr. Christiane Northrup, who I love, sent out an email today, and she was speaking to the fact that holistic practitioners, or those who are speaking differently than the mainstream, are being censored.
That's true.
When they have these, viewpoints that differ from what the large pharmaceutical companies are suggesting, what even the CDC is suggesting. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's another just really, really important issue for us to be aware of, and goes back to where do we find truth? Where can we find information that is accurate so that we can make our own trust, that you can trust, and then, as you said, and then make our own decisions based on that. That is really, really important, and will become more so. I think you're right, Muriel.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it goes back to, how do we use our voice in this? What pull do we have? Yep. As the general public? Do we have a say-so? Or is it just, this is it, this is the way it is, and it doesn't matter what you think? And I'm the same way with you, Mira. I'm in a high risk category, and I've never had the flu shot, ever.
Yeah. And there's a big fund to pay out damages for people that get paralyzed by vaccines. See, the thing is, vaccines may work, but we are trying to rush something to market that doesn't have a chance to get tested. We don't know what the results of it are. I remember, I think I saw that the date was 2009, where they tried to mandate the swine flu virus, the shot for the swine flu. And it was medical professionals that were on the line saying no. They were the ones protesting it at that time. So, it's interesting, because we talk about change and prejudice and polarity, and, like trying to find a way to come together. This whole debate has broken down to, or been oversimplified to, vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. It's not that simple. Yeah. There's questions of proper research, and proper vetting of something. And when you make things black and white, in opposition, then, where there's no truth in either side, or it's incomplete truth on both sides,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So how do we hold that to a higher authenticity? How do we? I'm just putting it out there. What do we do? How do we make our voices heard? And I don't have answers, but I know that there are a lot of petitions going on. There's a lot of grassroots efforts to say, okay, we're hearing this rumbling. We know this is coming down the pike, and we're not liking what we hear. So what can we do about it as a collective society? You know, how do we make a change in what's going already in process? We know it's in process. I've heard it. I've seen the ads looking for people to help out in doing this and doing, what's it called, where they're going to track the tracking of the people that had COVID and reaching out to the people they interact with. There's job opportunities for people to actually do that. So we know it's coming.
Yeah.
Now, how do we speak up? What do we do when we see this, when our eyes are open and we say, you know, I'm not comfortable with that?
Well, I think it's the same thing that we do with the BLM, Black Lives Matter, and that we do with other issues that are occurring. Is we make our voices heard to our representatives. We go to our local institutions. With the police, we find out what kind of mandates and what kind of union agreements they have. We write specific letters to the people that can influence it. With vaccines, I'm not sure who we reach out to, but I know that there have to be a number of petitions available. I'm sure there are web resources that are available, and it does become an issue of justice and freedom for all of us.
Yeah.
And remembering our personal empowerment too, because we forget, you know, in many traditions, and you know, whether it's faith and it could be even cultural, we are raised to be somewhat disempowered. We're raised with disempowering beliefs, and again, we're raised, you know, at times to stay smaller, especially the female of our population, less so than ever before. But we just have a general tendency to forget how empowered we actually are.
Yeah.
So, you know, so speaking up and doing all the things that you just named, Mira, is exercising your personal empowerment, and always remembering that we have great numbers, you know, and where, you know, how to find truth or how to find more information. Well, censoring is another topic we should talk about altogether on, you know, on another show, because it is kind of rearing its ugly head right now, very blatantly. And that's
both sides. That's what's interesting to me. You know, it's not one or the other side. It's happening in many cases.
Oh, and you know, and it's hard to, I have a hard time even believing it that in 2020, you know, that we're still being censored. I've always held a belief of truth that the truth has many, many facets. It's never one answer in point, you know, in space or time. It's a conglomeration of many perspectives. And one of the hallmarks of the new human, as I've identified it, is being able to hold many perspectives at once. And just as we are seeking and striving to desegregate ourselves, we also can desegregate our beliefs as well. And we'll come closer to a more, you know, pure picture that way.
I think the other thing that's very empowering is that there are more of us, and we just have to find each other. It's a heck of a lot more fun and more effective, I think, when we do come together in groups, in community, to try to speak out, you know, to make our voices heard, to sign the petition, to, you know, protest, whatever it is. It's just it's just more effective in community. And so, and then we just don't feel so alone in doing this. And it also helps us to keep going longer, because most social change takes a long time to affect. And so we have to be in it for the long haul. So, but I do think that there are so many more of us that are aware, or that, you know, have been questioning, and all they need is to find someone else who says, I'll lead the way, you know, just join me and I'll lead the way. And it, you know, if you'll be part of this community. So I think
that's also where we need to be discerning, because there are going to be people stepping up to say, I'll lead the way, and we need to make sure that they're the right people. And so I think it's really, really important in terms of freedom that we exercise our sovereignty in our own discernment and our own thinking and our own choosing, and not become subject to the dynamism of someone who is ready to lead just because they're stepping up.
Absolutely. And in fact, that goes back to that whole inner work, right? The ability to be so centered and so focused, and be listening to our intuition and our gut, so that we can truly hear what is truth for us and know how to make the decisions to move forward. So it just keeps circling back to that, doing that inner work on an ongoing daily basis.
Yeah.
And seeking those articles and that information that is being censored, because if it's being censored, there's somebody who's censoring it, and there's a reason that it's being censored. And that is, you know, sort of one body, or, you know, one organization, or one strain of thought that is wanting to censor that. But the way that we get to the truth and make the best choices, and give us the ability to be as proactive as possible, is, as you said, you know, Liz, too, just seeing all sides of it, reading all sides of it, getting as much information as possible, and then moving into your core gut sense around that after you have really exposed yourself to all sides.
Mm-hmm. You know, go ahead, Terry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and don't be so swayed by the smooth talkers. You know, there's going to be a lot that try to distract. And this is what, like you said, we have to use that gut, and the gut's not going to lie to us. So if something looks too good to be true, or, you know, there's just that sense of, ooh, I'm going to stay away from that, then pretty much your gut is talking to you. Mm-hmm. Mira, your thought?
I'm just thinking about the censorship thing, because we really haven't done a very good job at censoring hate speech, right? And I don't, in fact, for a long time, we said, no, we can't censor hate speech because we have freedom of speech. Now it looks like hate speech is being censored to a certain degree, which kind of opens the door for censoring other things. And one of the things, there's a lot of, Liz, as you said, holistic or alternative medicine stuff that has been censored, that is really, to me, terrifying that is being censored. And so the question to look at, to get a broader view of what might be going on, is to look at the organizations that have the power to do the censoring. Who is it that's doing the censoring, and what's the rationale for it? And to look deeply into that. And the thing is, as you said, Liz, people's lives are really busy. Where do we have the capability to be investigative journalists, you know, like, or detectives trying to figure out what kind of agenda is being run by organization, you know, like who's connected to who to connect to make this thing make sense?
Yeah.
It's really challenging.
If it's the social media organizations, are you willing to stop using that platform when you know that what they're doing is not right?
Or maybe that's, to me, that's almost a little bit like cutting you off your nose to spite your face.
Right.
Whereas you could also be taking action to impact the way that they proceed, just like, you know, saying let's disband the police departments rather than let's go in and look at the bylaws and the hiring practices, and let's rework it.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah. And it comes down to what's priority. You know, is it a priority in your life to find the truth? Is it a priority to sort through those things and to be that investigator and to really how important is it to really know, you know, and know what these vaccines are that we may be mandated to have? What is it? We can ask those questions. We don't have to just blindly say, okay, here's my arm. You know, ask the questions and really look at, okay, how important is this to me? Or is it one of those things like the garbage can earlier? I'm just going to let things just keep piling up in there, you know, and then when it gets uncomfortable, that's when something's going to take place where we decide, oh, there needs to be a change in that. But we can start way back at the very beginning, which is now, and see what our priorities are.
And really, it's like, is it important enough to be the detective? Really goes back to how important is your freedom.
Yeah. Yes. Where does that fall on that survey? Is freedom number one, or is it way down the list?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wild stuff. Oh my gosh. Did you look at the time?
I did look at the time. I feel like we just got started, ladies.
It's getting really juicy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it is a juicy topic, and change is always a juicy topic. But I really love the conversation that we had, and you know, maybe giving somebody a different perspective, because that's what conversations do. And that's why it's so important to keep conversations going right now about everything that's happening in our world. The more we can talk about it, put it out there. It may not be easy to say the things that need to be said, but we need to do it. If we're going to see a change at all in our world, we have to have the conversation with ourselves, with our kids, with our neighbors, you know, whoever we can speak up with, and really just get some openness going. There's been too much that's been hidden, and now it's time for that transparency to really go into everywhere, not just in certain places, but in everywhere.
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, I think what's made it even more challenging over the past, I don't know, maybe decade or so, but you know, the whole idea of being PC, politically correct. And I think so many individuals feel like they can't say anything. Like they're so afraid that whatever the conversation, whoever it is I'm speaking with, I'm gonna somehow offend someone. And so it's just easier for me to just not speak out, or just to talk amongst, you know, with my partner and my family and that type of thing. And so I think we have to start moving beyond that, to recognize that we are at such a critical point, and these are such critical issues. We can't afford to continue living that way. So as long as we're speaking our truth with love, that we're doing it, you know, in a way that is respectful, and that the rest of us are recognizing that that's what's happening. I'm going to listen to you, even if what you say I don't agree with, but I'm willing to listen and consider. And so I think it's just important for all of us to recognize that we need to have these conversations, we need to speak out, and we need to listen to others.
I think a really important step in that direction is when having those conversations before, if you're feeling nervous, if you're feeling uncomfortable, to ask permission and to set up a deliberately safe space to have a candid conversation, to say, hey, can I speak candidly? Can we just, and to come to the conversation with the presumption and intention of connection rather than trying to convince someone of something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
So seek to be understood, seek to understand before you seek to be understood.
Beautiful. Sheila, any last thoughts before we end our conversation
well,
today?
I just wanted to say that was a really beautiful tenet to live by, Mira. We'll have a much better world if everyone could could move toward that, you know, individually and collectively. And I think that we would have much more collaboration and sharing and moving forward to better effect.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This has been beautiful, ladies. We didn't solve the problems of the world, but we opened a door. We opened a door to look at what's out there and to really go inside and look at how do I feel about all of this. That's the first step. And then going forward. Next time that we meet will be 2 weeks from tonight. We'll be online with Mira leading the discussion. Mira, would you like to speak about what the topic would be?
Sure. We're going to talk about going from human doing to human being, which is, I think, the shift of paradigm that we need to really transform our relationships with each other and with our planet. So I think it'll be a lively conversation.
Always
You
is.
betcha.
Thank you for choosing this topic, Terry.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. I love discussing things like this because we always go deep. We don't stay on that surface for very long.
Yeah.
And so for those of you watching, thank you for being with us tonight. And if you like what you heard, we have a Facebook group called The Broader Edge. Come join that group and expand on what you heard here. Let us know your thoughts and what you would like to see us discuss. We're open for topics to bring out on the show. I just love these times together. And thank you to Dr. Ruth Anderson of Enlightened World Network for providing this platform that we are coming live on. And to all of you that listen, just take that moment to go inside and say, you know, what has changed me to me? What is that change that I want to see? And let's start there. Let's let that be the starting point. And who knows where it might lead. You may be the next leader leading us forward in that movement to change. I hope we have some of those out there, and I hope to be speaking out myself. That's what I feel like we're here for right now, is to be the leaders and to be the ones that aren't afraid to say the words and have those deep conversations. So thank you, ladies. This has been delightful.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
So we're going to end our show with a little recording, and then have a blessed rest of your day or night, morning, whatever it is where you are. And thank you for being with us. Much love to everybody.
Thanks for joining us on The Broader Edge. Our mission is to empower and engage you in shaping our tomorrow, because your impact matters. Help us spread the word by liking and sharing on social media. Be sure to join us on alternate Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on Enlightened World Network for candid conversations that envision a new future. The information, views and opinions expressed by The Broader Edge co-hosts, guests and associates are intended to inspire and empower you and should not be construed as medical, psychological, financial or legal advice.